racist cop harasses black woman. Moments later, he finds out she's Secret Service. A routine traffic stop on a sweltering summer afternoon, a scenario that should be resolved with little more than a traffic ticket, spirals into a shocking display of abuse of power, prejudice, and simmering tension. Officer Derek Stone, known for his short fuse and questionable tactics, targets Simone Carter, an elegant yet unassuming black woman driving through a busy Washington, D.C. street. He thinks he can wield his badge to terrorize her into submission. But unbeknownst to him, Simone holds a powerful secret, one that could change his life forever. Soon, an explosive truth will be revealed, and Officer Stone will learn the hard way that appearances can be deceiving. The bright summer sun glinted off the windshields of endless rows of cars inching their way through downtown Washington, D.C. Tourists gawked at grand architecture, sleek government SUVs rushed past, and a light breeze carried the buzz of everyday city life. In the middle of the afternoon, the flow of traffic was routine, almost hypnotic. Another day in the nation's capital. Simone Carter sat in her black sedan, inching forward at a glacial pace. She was used to this. After all, D.C. was notorious for its traffic bottlenecks. Most people would be fuming behind the wheel, but Simone maintained an air of unflappable composure. She leaned slightly forward, her posture poised, occasionally scanning her rearview mirror. A stylish pair of sunglasses rested on her face, reflecting the scenery around her. At a glance, she appeared to be just another commuter returning from a mundane errand. What no one knew was that Simone had grown up a mere 15 minutes from here, in a modest row house on the southeast side. She had spent her childhood dreaming of making a difference, walking by the Capitol building and the White House with wide-eyed wonder. One day, she had vowed, she would serve her country. Countless obstacles had lined her path, financial struggles, social hurdles, and a world that too often judged her by her skin color before her skills or character, but she had persevered. As the line of cars inched forward again, Simone glanced at her watch. She needed to be across town for a quick administrative check-in. Although not an official mission, her schedule was tight, and lateness was never an option. She silently prayed the traffic gods would grant her a smooth passage soon. A block away, near the intersection of K Street and 16th, she noticed a lone figure, a police officer standing outside his patrol car. Even from a distance, he appeared restless, constantly pacing, fiddling with his uniform belt, and scanning vehicles as though he were searching for his next target. Simone didn't think much of it at first. After all, the Metropolitan Police Department was a common sight in the city's busiest corridors, but there was something about the way he pointed at cars, his mouth set in a permanent scowl, that sent a flicker of apprehension through her. She mentally steeled herself, a habit honed over years of being a black woman in a city that, for all its diversity and power, still harbored pockets of prejudice. She was used to curious eyes, cautious gestures, and the lingering sense that not everyone with a badge would treat her fairly. She inched closer, and the officer's gaze zeroed in on her vehicle. It was a moment too familiar, sudden scrutiny that often made her wonder if she'd done anything wrong, or if she simply fit the description. Her heart remained steady, but a certain alertness sharpened her senses. Simone inhaled slowly, adjusting her grip on the steering wheel. She had no idea that this encounter with Officer Derek Stone would catapult her into a swirling storm of confrontation, revelation, and ultimately a defining moment in both of their lives. Officer Derek Stone was no stranger to controversy. Standing at 6'2", with a burly build and sharp, hawk-like eyes, he was an imposing presence. Even in a department with strict protocols and oversight, he'd earned a reputation for being too quick to draw his weapon and far too eager to force compliance. For years, Stone had navigated the thin blue line with more negative complaints than commendations, yet somehow he'd managed to dodge any serious departmental punishments. Whispers circulated among his peers that his uncle, a high-ranking city official, ensured Stone remained untouchable. Born and raised in a small town in rural Virginia, Stone had come to the Metropolitan Police Department seeking the excitement of city life and the authority that came with wearing the badge. In the early days of his career, he had shown genuine promise, earning a couple of commendations for bravery in the field. But gradually, cynicism and a sense of superiority took root. He'd gone from an idealistic rookie to a hardened officer who saw threats around every corner. He was also plagued by deeply ingrained racial biases. Whether from his upbringing or personal insecurities, Stone frequently displayed an almost instinctive suspicion toward people of color. Since joining the force, he had participated in dozens of stop-and-frisk incidents that disproportionately targeted black and Latino citizens, always justifying his actions by citing reasonable suspicion. His superiors were well aware of the stats, but turned a blind eye, chalking it up to Stone's aggressive approach or proactive policing. That afternoon, however, Stone was not in a good mood. He had received a reprimand from his lieutenant for a recent incident involving a teenager he'd interrogated at gunpoint. The departmental review was ongoing, and although Stone dismissed the matter as a non-issue, he couldn't shake an unsettling feeling. His lieutenant had warned him explicitly, "One more incident, Derek, and you're out. Oh, I don't care who your uncle is. I'm done cleaning up your messes." The words echoed in his head, fueling the simmering anger that now drove him to prowl the streets in search of a real violation. When Stone caught sight of Simone Carter's sedan, it was less about the car's make or model and more about a flash of perceived defiance in the driver's posture. In truth, Simone had done nothing wrong, but Stone's eyes narrowed. Maybe it was the tinted windows he deemed too dark. Maybe it was the fleeting expression on Simone's face that he interpreted as disrespect. Whatever the reason, he decided in that moment she would be his next target. He climbed into his cruiser, slamming the driver's door with more force than necessary. "Dispatch, this is Officer Stone. I'm pulling over a suspicious vehicle on K and 16th. Request a license plate check," he barked into the radio, though no immediate backup was requested. Stone was confident in his ability to handle the situation alone. As he eased his cruiser behind Simone's sedan, adrenaline coursed through him. This was his chance to reassert control, to prove to himself, if not to his lieutenant, that he could still be the authoritative figure. He wanted to flex his authority in a way that left no doubt who was in charge. What he didn't realize was that his target had more authority in her little finger than he could ever dream of wielding. In a matter of minutes, Derek Stone's life was about to take an irreversible turn, forcing him to confront the ugly truths he'd hidden behind his badge. Simone felt that familiar rush of anxiety when she noticed the flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. She let out a measured sigh, silently wondering if this was a routine check or a typical case of driving while black. The tension in the air became palpable as Officer Derek Stone's cruiser crept closer. She rolled her car forward to find a safe place to pull over, carefully signaling her intent, hoping to show absolute compliance. Her heart pounded, not from guilt, but from the memory of past encounters. Even though she was well equipped to handle this, Simone understood that the wrong word or movement could quickly escalate. She also knew her training demanded that she remain calm and let the officer speak first. Stone approached her driver's side window with a swagger that Simone had seen all too often. Before she could fully lower her window, Stone rapped sharply on the glass. His jaw clenched. "License and registration," he ordered, not bothering with a greeting. The hostility in his voice made the hairs on the back of Simone's neck prickle. She glanced up at him. Officer Stone's face was carved into a deep scowl, his hand resting on the butt of his service weapon. "Good afternoon, officer," she began in a measured tone. "I'm reaching for my wallet. My registration is in the glove compartment." "Slowly," he snapped, raising his free hand in a cautionary gesture. "Keep your other hand where I can see it." Maintaining deliberate, careful movements, Simone retrieved her wallet and passed over her license. Then she reached for the registration, Stone snatched the documents from her hand, his eyes flicking from the ID to Simone's face. A flicker of confusion crossed his features, as if he had expected something else, a name with a record perhaps. But Simone Carter had a spotless driving history and no criminal background. "What's the reason for this stop, officer?" Simone asked, her voice calm. Stone's upper lip twitched in annoyance. He didn't have a legitimate reason besides his own biases and the hope of finding something to charge her with. "Your window tint," he improvised. "I suspect it's beyond the legal limit, and you made a lane change without signaling back there." Simone fought the urge to correct him about the lane change. She had signaled. Instead, she responded, "I see. I wasn't aware there was an issue with the tint." Stone sneered. "Don't play dumb with me. Where are you headed in such a hurry?" Simone paused, choosing her words carefully. She knew she wasn't obligated to provide every detail of her schedule, but she also didn't want to provoke him. "I have an appointment. Is there any other reason you pulled me over?" He glared at her, then muttered something unintelligible under his breath. "Wait here," he commanded, turning sharply on his heel to head back to his cruiser. As he walked away, Simone closed her eyes for a moment, her breath steady. Training had drilled into her the importance of remaining calm under stress, but the frustration gnawed at her. This situation wasn't just about a traffic violation. It was about a man with unchecked power exercising his prejudices. Little did he know that he was stepping into dangerous territory, harassing someone whose clearance and authority far exceeded his own. Simone opened her eyes, scanning the busy street. Pedestrians hurried by, oblivious to the tension brewing mere feet away. But soon that tension would become impossible to ignore. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of Derek Stone's world and reveal the unbreakable resolve of Simone Carter. Officer Stone retreated to his cruiser with Simone's license and registration in hand. His mind raced with conflicting emotions, irritation at being forced to justify a stop he knew was baseless, yet an odd exhilaration at the prospect of uncovering something incriminating. He typed Simone's information into the patrol car's computer. With each keystroke, the screen's official database returned the same conclusion: no warrants, no priors, no issues. Her record was immaculate. Out on the street, Simone's patience began to wear thin. The searing sunlight beaming through her windshield felt like a spotlight on a stage where she'd been cast in an unwelcome role. She drummed her fingers lightly on the steering wheel, replaying the last few minutes in her mind. Although she had no reason to fear the outcome, she also knew how quickly situations like this could escalate. As if on cue, a couple of curious pedestrians slowed their pace, peering at the scene. More than a few of them had smartphones in hand. One young woman, her eyes filled with cautious concern, hovered nearby, filming from a discreet distance. Simone noticed the camera. Part of her was grateful someone was documenting the encounter. Another part resented that such documentation was even necessary. Inside his cruiser, Stone cursed under his breath. Nothing. He had nothing on her. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to make something stick. His pride demanded that he exert dominance, especially after the dressing down from his lieutenant earlier. In Stone's mind, a successful bust, any bust, would help redeem his tarnished reputation. He reached for his radio, considering whether to call for backup. But he hesitated. He had no legitimate reason. If he called for backup without cause, his lieutenant would surely ask questions. Yet the last thing Stone wanted was to return to the station empty-handed, only to be mocked by his peers or worse, reprimanded again by his lieutenant. A flicker of anger shot through him. He slammed the computer shut and stepped out of the cruiser, determined to dig deeper. Approaching Simone's car, he hardened his expression. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Simone's gut tightened. She knew this request was unwarranted, but she also knew disobeying could escalate the situation dangerously. Carefully, she unlocked her seatbelt and opened the door. Standing by the roadside in her business-casual attire, she looked calm and composed, a stark contrast to Stone's aggressive stance. "Turn around. Place your hands on the roof," Stone barked. "I'm going to do a quick search for any contraband." A surge of indignation rushed through Simone. This was blatant harassment. There was no probable cause. She momentarily contemplated revealing her position, her badge that outranked his. But her years of training cautioned patience, especially if it meant catching Stone in the act of misconduct. So she turned, placing her palms flat against the warm, metal roof of her car. Vehicles rushed by, and a few more onlookers gathered, the tension palpable in the humid summer air. Stone patted down her arms, her torso, her legs, a search that straddled the line of decency. Simone ground her teeth, refusing to utter a sound of protest until she was certain it was time to speak. At last, Stone stepped back, empty-handed. The frustration in his voice was clear when he spoke. "Look at me," he said in a tone that made passers-by wince. Simone turned, her eyes meeting his. For a split second, neither moved. Two worlds collided in that tense gaze, one forged in bigotry and misplaced pride, another in disciplined resolve and secret authority. It was only a matter of time before those worlds would erupt in a confrontation that would redefine both of their lives, and the city that watched from the sidelines. A small crowd was starting to form on the sidewalk. Some people filmed openly, while others pretended to fumble with their phones. The air crackled with the electric potential for confrontation, a sense that something explosive was on the verge of unfolding. Officer Stone, however, seemed undeterred. If anything, the emerging audience only fueled his bravado, compelling him to amplify his performance of control. "Put your hands where I can see them," Stone growled again, though Simone's hands were clearly visible at her sides. His tone dripped with condescension. "What's in your pockets?" She pressed her lips together, casting a brief glance at a bystander who looked ready to intervene, but any protest from the crowd would likely only aggravate Stone further. With slow, deliberate motions, Simone pulled out her cell phone, keys, and a small wallet for her work ID, careful not to reveal the Secret Service badge tucked inside just yet. Stone snatched the items from her, inspecting them as though they might hold a dark secret. Nothing. He let the keys and phone clatter to the hood, which elicited gasps from the onlookers. Simone's frustration grew, but she forced herself to remain calm. A soft but firm voice from the crowd piped up, "Hey, officer, you've got no reason to treat her like that." A middle-aged man in a button-down shirt stepped forward. His face was reddening, not from embarrassment, but from anger. Stone whipped around. "This is a police matter. Step back," he hissed, one hand drifting toward the holster on his hip. The man raised his hands in surrender. "I'm just saying," he murmured, retreating a few steps. "No need to be rough." Now thoroughly on edge, Stone pointed at the small congregation of onlookers, his eyes livid. "All of you back off. This is an active investigation." With the tension at a boiling point, Simone seized the moment. "Officer," she said quietly, lifting her chin, "I think we both know this isn't a legitimate investigation. You've done your search and you found nothing." Stone turned back to her, rage twisting his features. "Don't tell me how to do my job," he snapped. "For all I know, you're involved in something illegal. You're acting suspicious." Simone's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. She took a deep breath. Her training had prepared her to handle threats far more serious than a belligerent cop. In her role with the Secret Service, she had diffused threats to sitting presidents. She'd tackled armed suspects twice her size. She had stared down genuine threats, men armed with assault rifles, and never once lost her composure. Compared to that, Officer Derek Stone was little more than a persistent annoyance, albeit a dangerous one. But Simone also knew that if she revealed her credentials too soon, Stone might try to spin the situation to his advantage. He could claim that Simone had withheld critical information or even attempt to arrest her under false pretenses. For maximum impact, and for her own safety, she needed to pick the perfect moment to reveal her identity. Behind them, the crowd continued to grow, the hum of uncertain murmurs mixed with the sound of traffic. Several bystanders were openly calling Stone out now. "This is wrong," one shouted. Another said, "We've got everything on video." The tension was so thick it felt like a thunderstorm poised to break. Stone's eyes flickered around, scanning the group. When they returned to Simone, his animosity only seemed to double. His fists clenched at his sides, the tautness in his shoulders clear as day. He looked like a man balancing on a knife's edge, uncertain whether to stand down or escalate. In that moment, Simone realized she might be forced to reveal her identity sooner than she intended. The swirling chaos around them felt like a flashpoint. A single spark could ignite an inferno of violence, and she had a responsibility to prevent that. Her moral and professional code demanded it. But first, she'd give Stone one last chance to walk away unscathed. If he chose to press on, the fallout would be entirely of his own making. And when the dust settled, the world would see Officer Derek Stone for who he really was, while discovering who Simone Carter truly represented. Beads of sweat dotted Officer Stone's forehead. His scowl deepened as he surveyed the gathering crowd, their eyes all on him, phones capturing every second. His heart pounded, a mix of anger and anxiety. He knew that if he lost control of the situation now, it could spell disaster for his already teetering career. Yet the fear of appearing weak pushed him deeper into hostility. In a sudden move, Stone grabbed the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, I need backup at K and 16th, immediate," he shouted. He deliberately kept his tone urgent, as if facing a dangerous suspect. The words sent an uneasy ripple through the bystanders. Many recognized the tactic of overplaying a situation to justify an arrest or violent action. Simone's pulse quickened. She could imagine how the call for backup would be framed. A non-compliant individual, possibly armed, requiring immediate attention. Soon, more officers, maybe even a squad, would descend on the scene, likely predisposed to trust Stone's version of events. She glanced at the faces in the crowd, some of them visibly concerned. A few passers-by murmured about leaving, fearing the chaos that often followed police escalation, but others stayed, perhaps feeling a moral obligation to witness and record. Stone turned back to Simone, his lips curled into a triumphant sneer. "Now, we're gonna straighten this out. And if I find out you've been lying about anything, it's going to be a long day for you." Simone weighed her options carefully. If she waited too long to reveal her badge, the arrival of more officers might complicate matters. Alternatively, if she showed it prematurely, Stone might lash out. Her mind raced through the protocols she had memorized during her Secret Service training, how to handle an aggressive law enforcement officer without blowing her cover prematurely. She chose to speak measuredly. "Officer, I've complied with all your requests. You have my license, my registration, and you've searched me. I'm not carrying anything illegal. Is there any reason for you to continue detaining me?" Stone's eyes flickered with uncertainty. He opened his mouth, but before he could reply, the roar of sirens approached. 2 additional patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing, adding to the spectacle unfolding on the street. From one of the cars emerged a female officer with short, cropped hair, her expression a mix of concern and irritation. "Stone, what's going on?" she demanded, marching over. Her name tag read Officer Delgado, and she looked from Stone to Simone and then to the crowd. Stone's posture stiffened as he replied curtly, "Need you to help me contain the suspect?" "She's being—" "Suspect?" Officer Delgado echoed, eyeing Simone's calm stance. Something about this scenario didn't sit right with her. She glanced at the bystanders, who were gesturing emphatically at their phones. Murmurs of harassment and no probable cause filled the air. A second officer, a tall man named Officer Hughes, came around to Stone's side, looking more perplexed than anything. "Stone, we got your call. What's the probable cause for a search and detainment?" Stone bristled. "She has illegal window tint and was driving erratically. Plus, she's been uncooperative." "So I had reason to suspect—" Delgado's brow furrowed. She gazed at Simone, who stood with her chin held high, clearly not causing any disturbance. "Did you find anything suspicious on her or in her vehicle?" "No," Stone admitted, as if the word tasted bitter. Officer Delgado's eyes narrowed. She sensed that Stone was manufacturing a crisis. The onlookers' phones captured every flicker of emotion on her face. If there was one thing Delgado despised, it was seeing her department's reputation tarnished by unnecessary aggression. Simone seized the opportunity, subtly clearing her throat. She felt the weight of her credentials in her pocket, a silent reminder of who she truly was. Time was running out, and if she didn't speak soon, the situation might spiral beyond her control, something the Secret Service could not afford. She looked directly at Delgado and Hughes, ignoring Stone's glare. "Officers, I have some information that may clarify why this stop is a mistake. If you'll allow me, I'd like to show you something that proves I'm no threat." Stone opened his mouth to protest, but Delgado gestured for him to be quiet. "Go ahead, ma'am." Heart thudding, Simone reached cautiously into her jacket, praying that common sense would prevail over Stone's paranoia. She was about to reveal her true identity in front of a crowd and half the DC police force. Little did she know, her words would not only expose Stone's biases, but also ignite a chain of events that would change their lives forever. The sidewalk fell silent, save for the humming engines and the distant chatter of traffic. Simone carefully pulled out her leather badge holder, unfolding it with calm, deliberate precision. For a split second, Stone and the other officers tensed, hands reflexively hovering near their holsters. The tension was suffocating, as if the entire city paused to hold its breath. Then Simone flipped open the holder, revealing the unmistakable insignia of the United States Secret Service. She extended it toward Officer Delgado, who leaned in to verify it. Her face immediately shifted from skepticism to astonishment, and then to a kind of incredulous respect. Officer Hughes, peering over Delgado's shoulder, widened his eyes. Even a few bystanders craned their necks, trying to catch a glimpse of the emblem. "I'm Agent Simone Carter," Simone announced, her voice unwavering. "I'm with the Secret Service, assigned to protective duties in Washington, D.C. I'm currently on my personal time, but I am authorized to carry and, I assure you, my credentials are legitimate." For a moment, no one spoke. The gravity of her revelation weighed heavily in the air, radiating a silent authority that overshadowed Stone's entire show of force. Delgado drew in a sharp breath, her professional instincts kicking in. "Agent Carter, I apologize," she began quietly, stepping forward. "We weren't informed of any operation." Simone offered a small nod. "It's not an operation. I was just passing through, heading to an appointment. This stop," she gestured politely to Stone, "seems to have been a misunderstanding." Officer Stone, however, seemed rooted to the spot. A mixture of disbelief and panic flooded his expression. He stared at the badge as though it were a weapon aimed directly at him. All the bravado, all the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by a sickly pallor. For a beat, he said nothing, his mind racing to salvage what remained of his credibility. One of the bystanders broke the silence. "She's Secret Service?" came a whispered exclamation, and the crowd erupted into a confused yet rapturous buzz. Phones were lifted higher, capturing every angle of Stone's humiliation. Finally, Stone managed to speak. This can't be right," he stammered. "Why didn't you identify yourself earlier?" His tone was accusatory, as though he were the wronged party. Simone inhaled, mustering patience. "I am not obligated to inform every officer who stops me that I'm Secret Service, especially if there's no legal reason to stop me in the first place. I complied with your requests, hoping we could resolve this quickly, but you escalated the situation, officer." Delgado and Hughes shot each other troubled looks. Hughes cleared his throat. "Agent Carter, let's get this straightened out immediately. Would you like to file a complaint?" Stone's mouth fell open. He looked at Hughes, as though betrayed, but Hughes simply shrugged. He was following protocol. Simone exhaled slowly, glancing at the crowd behind them, still filming, still whispering. She could practically see the headlines forming. "I'd like to be on my way," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "I have commitments. and I don't wish to make a bigger scene. However, I will be reporting this incident through the appropriate channels." Stone's breath came in quick, shallow bursts. His eyes darted from Simone's badge to the faces of his fellow officers, to the onlookers with cameras. He realized, with dawning horror, that this was more than just a minor embarrassment. This was the kind of scandal that could end careers, especially his already shaky one. Despite the surge of triumph and anger coursing through her, Simone forced herself to remain poised. She carefully closed her badge holder and returned it to her pocket. The cat was out of the bag. Officer Stone's harassment was now a matter of record, witnessed by multiple phones, multiple officers, and, most significantly, a federal agent whose word held serious weight. And in the world of law enforcement politics, a single complaint from a Secret Service agent could rain down consequences far more severe than any routine citizen complaint. With her cover officially blown, Simone steeled herself for the ripple effects that were sure to follow, for Stone, for the department, and even for her own career. The moment Simone reholstered her badge, the atmosphere underwent a dramatic shift. No longer were people murmuring about an abusive cop. Now they were witnessing a scandal in the making, one involving a racist officer who had just harassed a federal agent. Phone cameras captured every excruciating second of Stone's mortification, ensuring that the encounter would outlive the day. Officer Delgado took charge. "Agent Carter, I'm sorry you had to go through that," she said, her voice tinged with genuine remorse. "We'll escort you if you'd like to leave. If you need to file a formal complaint, or if you want to speak with our watch commander, we can arrange that." Simone shook her head, briefly glancing at Stone, who looked like he wished the sidewalk would swallow him whole. "I'll handle it through the federal channels," she replied. "But I appreciate your concern, Officer Delgado." Delgado nodded, then turned to Stone, her tone shifting to one of stern professionalism. "Stone, hand over her license and registration, right now." For a moment, Stone hesitated, still dazed. Delgado's eyes flickered with impatience. "Now, officer," she repeated, her voice cold. With trembling hands, Stone relinquished Simone's documents. She took them back calmly, sliding them into her pocket. "Thank you," Simone said, addressing Delgado and Hughes, not Stone. Then, turning to the small crowd of onlookers, she offered a nod of gratitude. "Thank you for your concern, everyone. I'm fine." Slowly, the crowd began to disperse. Some people shouted words of support, others glared daggers at Stone, and a few even gave Simone a respectful salute when they learned she was Secret Service. The tension in the air started to ease, replaced by a wave of curiosity and a subtle undercurrent of condemnation aimed squarely at Stone. With a final glance at Stone's ashen face, Simone stepped into her car. She turned the key, the engine rumbling to life, and pulled away from the curb. In her rearview mirror, she saw Officer Delgado radioing in what looked like a code for "all clear," while Stone stood stiffly, arms at his sides, as though shackled by his own shock. The image stayed with her as she drove off, heart still pounding at the near miss she'd just experienced. Meanwhile, Stone remained rooted on the sidewalk, Officer Hughes hovering nearby. Delgado, speaking quietly into her shoulder radio, relayed the situation to their commanding officer. It was protocol. An incident involving a federal agent required immediate documentation. Stone's face burned hot with the knowledge that his superiors, and possibly the mayor's office, would be alerted. Worse, the presence of cameras guaranteed that this fiasco would spread across social media like wildfire. Delgado finished her transmission and turned to Stone, shaking her head. "What the hell were you thinking?" she demanded. "We talked about this kind of behavior, Stone. You're on thin ice." He wanted to defend himself, to say that Simone had acted suspiciously, or that he was only doing his job, but the words stuck in his throat. He knew none of it would fly, especially given the footage. The look in Delgado's eyes told him that she was done covering for him or letting him skate by on his uncle's influence. "We're heading back to the precinct," she ordered, her tone merciless. "I'm filing an immediate report with the lieutenant." She paused, letting her gaze rake over Stone's hunched shoulders. "I suggest you get a lawyer." At that moment, Stone realized that everything he'd been warned about had come to pass. His record of borderline stops, his refusal to let go of his prejudices, his quick temper, all of it had led to this very public, very humiliating downfall, and something told him this was only the beginning. At the precinct, the shockwaves of the day's events grew louder. Rumors flitted between the ranks. Stone had harassed a Secret Service agent, it was all on camera, and the agent was likely to file a formal complaint. Whispers circulated about how the city's leadership, including Stone's uncle, wouldn't be able to suppress such a high-profile incident. Unbeknownst to Stone, even more severe consequences lurked on the horizon, orchestrated by a government agency far more powerful than his local precinct. In the coming days, the weight of Simone Carter's badge and the principles she stood for would come crashing down on him like a hammer of justice. For now, though, Stone was left to stew in the discomfort of his own making, as the precinct's corridors buzzed with excitement, disbelief, and the faint but ever-growing scent of retribution. Later that evening, as Simone Carter drove back to her apartment in Arlington, Virginia, she tried to shake off the lingering tension from the encounter. In her line of work, she had faced threats 100 times more dangerous than a misguided cop. Still, the blatant injustice of the stop had left her unsettled. She found herself replaying the confrontation, wishing that Stone's behavior was an anomaly rather than an all-too-common occurrence. Her apartment was modest but comfortable, a sanctuary from the high-stakes, high-stress lifestyle her job demanded. She slipped off her shoes and sank onto the sofa, exhaling a long, tired breath. A half-smile tugged at her lips when she recalled how Stone's face fell upon seeing her badge. The memory was bittersweet, a triumph marred by the sobering reality that many people, particularly those without her credentials, face similar stops without any recourse. As she gazed at the framed photographs on her living room wall, her mind journeyed back to the path that had brought her here. She thought of her mother, who had raised her alone in Southeast D.C. after her father passed away when she was still a child. Money was always tight, and violence often lurked just around the corner. But her mother instilled in her a sense of unbreakable determination. "Never let anyone tell you what you can't do," she would say, "because you can do anything you set your mind to, Simone." Fueled by that belief, Simone had excelled academically, earning scholarships that eventually led her to Howard University, one of the most prestigious historically black colleges in the country. Her time at Howard was transformative. She learned about African American history in deeper, richer contexts than she'd ever imagined. She absorbed stories of bravery, struggle, and triumph. These narratives fused with her own ambitions, shaping a purpose that would guide her for years to come. She joined the ROTC program while at Howard, fueled by a desire to serve her country and break boundaries. Her discipline and leadership qualities stood out, earning her respect from peers and instructors alike. After graduation, Simone faced a critical decision. Which path in federal service would she pursue? The Secret Service beckoned, and despite the daunting challenges, she dove in head first. Her training was grueling, long hours of firearms practice, close combat drills, and endless lectures on crisis management. Among her cohort, she was one of the few women, and one of even fewer black women. Many times she felt the weight of skeptical eyes upon her, a silent challenge to prove she could handle the job. Time and time again, she rose to the occasion. Eventually, she earned her place on a protective detail for high-profile individuals in Washington, D.C. She traveled extensively, brushed shoulders with political powerhouses, and even secured the perimeter for events at the White House. Each assignment came with its own set of perils, but Simone thrived under pressure. Yet, for all her achievements and accolades, days like today reminded her that even a federal badge couldn't shield her from the prejudice that accompanied her identity. She wondered how many times in the past she had been pulled over or questioned simply for existing in a space some believed she didn't belong. The difference now was that her position offered her a voice, a platform she intended to use. She knew she had a responsibility, both as an agent and as a role model for those who watched her journey, to call out injustice when she saw it. Her mother's lessons, Howard's influence, and her own moral compass told her that letting Stone off the hook would be a disservice not just to herself, but to every person who'd ever been harassed without recourse. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She saw a message from her supervising agent, asking for details about the incident. Clearly, word had already reached the Secret Service. Resolved, Simone picked up the phone. She had a report to file, and her statement would likely trigger an internal investigation that could ripple through local law enforcement. As she dialed her supervisor, she steeled her heart against any doubt. She'd come too far and overcome too much to remain silent. This wasn't just about her, it was about accountability and the principles she had pledged to protect. While Simone prepared her official statement from the comfort of her apartment, Officer Derek Stone found himself in a very different environment, isolated in the precinct's interrogation room, waiting anxiously to speak with his lieutenant. The sterile grey walls seemed to close in on him as he contemplated the mess he had created. He had barely returned from the scene when the onslaught began. A barrage of phone calls, texts, and furious emails hammered the precinct's leadership. Local news outlets and blogs had already picked up video snippets of the incident, labeling Stone as the racist cop who harassed a Secret Service agent. The story spread quickly on social media, garnering thousands of comments condemning his actions. Hashtags demanding justice trended overnight. Stone's internal meltdown was evident to the handful of colleagues who passed him in the corridor. Some whispered behind his back, while others openly rolled their eyes at him. Even the desk sergeant, usually stoic, gave Stone a pointed look that said, "What did you do this time?" He had tried calling his uncle, the influential city official, hoping for a miracle. But his uncle simply barked, "You messed with a federal agent. Are you trying to ruin my reputation too?" and slammed the phone down. It was clear that any protective shield Stone once relied upon had vanished. The door to the interrogation room finally swung open, revealing Lieutenant Camden Reyes, a calm, meticulous officer known for his intolerance of misconduct. Reyes carried a stack of papers, presumably the preliminary reports, depositions, and a USB drive likely containing video footage. He took a seat across from Stone and folded his hands on the table. "Officer Stone," Reyes began in an even tone, "I've just reviewed multiple angles of footage, as well as statements from witnesses, Officers Delgado and Hughes, and Agent Carter herself." He paused, looking Stone squarely in the eye. "What on earth were you thinking?" Stone opened his mouth, but words failed him. He felt the same wave of panic he'd experienced on the sidewalk. I had probable cause," he stuttered, though it sounded hollow even to him. "Her window tint. She was driving suspiciously." Reyes scoffed, flipping open a folder to reveal legal data on window tint regulations. The tint on her vehicle was within legal limits. Officer Delgado verified that on the scene, and there's clear footage of her signaling before changing lanes. Not to mention, even if you had the slightest justification, your conduct during the stop was, to put it bluntly, beyond unprofessional. Stone's pulse hammered in his ears. "Look, I didn't know she was Secret Service," he snapped defensively. Reyes's eyes narrowed. "That's precisely the point. You had no legitimate reason to suspect her of anything to begin with. The fact that she turned out to be an agent is what's made this a federal incident. But even if she were just another citizen, your actions would still be unacceptable." A tense silence fell between them. Reyes leaned forward. "As it stands, we have no choice but to place you on immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation. And given the public outcry and the federal complaint that's been filed, I can't see any scenario where you walk away unscathed." Stone slumped in his seat, swallowing hard. "Administrative leave," he repeated, voice quivering. His mind whirled with visions of financial ruin, legal battles, public humiliation. He wanted to argue, to claim self-defense, to blame the department for lack of training, anything to deflect responsibility. But he could read the finality in Reyes's eyes. Reyes stood, gathering his documents. "Turn in your badge and service weapon before you leave," he said briskly. "I'll be recommending further disciplinary actions and likely charges to the board. We'll notify you once the internal review is complete. Until then, do yourself a favor and stay out of the limelight." Stone could barely breathe. The door closed behind Reyes, and the emptiness of the room seemed to press down on him from all sides. He realized in that moment that he was facing the very fate he had worked so hard to avoid: public disgrace, departmental betrayal, and possibly criminal charges. All because he couldn't keep his prejudice in check. Outside, the city buzzed with fury. Local activists called for Stone's termination and broader reform. Politicians made statements vowing to address systemic issues in law enforcement. And through it all, Simone Carter's calm, unyielding face appeared in news clips, the unwavering woman who refused to be another silent victim. For Officer Derek Stone, the downfall had only just begun, and he sensed that the consequences he now faced were as unavoidable as the next sunrise. In the weeks that followed, Derek Stone's world collapsed around him. The internal affairs investigation concluded that he had acted without reasonable suspicion or cause. His record of complaints, from minor infractions to more severe allegations, was re-examined with renewed scrutiny. It was as though the entire department, freed from the shackles of his uncle's influence, found the courage to purge a problem that had long tarnished its ranks. In a public statement, the Metropolitan Police Department announced Stone's suspension without pay, pending the outcome of criminal proceedings for misconduct and false reporting. Stone watched it all unfold from the solitude of his small apartment, where he spent his days listlessly channel surfing and turning off every news segment that mentioned his name. Each story hammered another nail into the coffin of his law enforcement career. Civil rights organizations joined the fray, highlighting Simone's case as a glaring example of racial bias in policing. The scandal sparked citywide discussions and town halls where citizens and activists debated reforms to ensure accountability. Stone was no longer just a disgraced cop. He had unwittingly become the poster child for everything wrong with policing in the eyes of many. Meanwhile, Simone Carter found her own life under the spotlight. Initially, she had tried to keep a low profile, but her involvement in the Stone incident became impossible to conceal. Colleagues and supervisors within the Secret Service reached out, some in support, others with cautionary advice. "Are you sure you want to pursue this so publicly?" one high-ranking official asked her. "It could affect your future assignments." Yet Simone remained steadfast. She was aware of the potential professional repercussions, but she felt a moral obligation to see this through. When the city's district attorney requested her official testimony, she provided it willingly. If Stone was truly sorry, if he was a victim of a broken system, then let the courts decide. But she knew in her heart that if people never spoke up against abuse of power, the cycle would continue unbroken. After giving her deposition, Simone retreated briefly from the frenzy, taking a few days of leave to visit her mother in the old neighborhood. She found solace in the familiarity of the streets where she'd grown up. Some residents recognized her, offering words of thanks and praise. "You stood up for us," or "You showed them we're not just easy targets." These interactions reminded her why she'd chosen to serve in the first place. On the last day of her visit, she took a walk past the White House, feeling a sense of pride wash over her. She had come so far from the young girl who once marveled at these historic buildings. Now she was one of the guardians entrusted with their protection, and by standing up to Stone, she had in a way protected the ideals these buildings represented: justice, equity, and the rule of law. Stone, on the other hand, faced a very different reality. Despite frantic attempts to salvage his career, he was formally fired 2 months after the incident. The criminal case against him progressed, fueled by Simone's testimony and the damning video evidence. A grand jury indicted him on charges of civil rights violations and abuse of power. His once influential uncle remained conspicuously silent, distancing himself to avoid political fallout. On the morning of Stone's trial, the courthouse was swarmed by reporters, activists, and curious citizens. Stone arrived in a cheap suit, looking pale and gaunt, his eyes sunken with worry. He avoided the cameras, head bowed, as he pushed through the throng. Inside, the courtroom was tense. The prosecution laid out a narrative of repeated misconduct, culminating in the final confrontation with Simone Carter. Even Stone's court-appointed attorney seemed resigned, struggling to mount a convincing defense. Though the trial had only just begun, Stone already felt the cold hand of karma clutching at his shoulder. This wasn't a matter of if he'd face consequences, but how severe they would be. The city, once indifferent or silently complicit in his actions, demanded accountability now, and while Stone wrestled with the wreckage of his choices, Simone resumed her duties with quiet determination. She stood post at high-level gatherings, guided visiting dignitaries through secure areas, and trained younger agents. Occasionally she caught a glimpse of the headlines about the Stone case. Each update was a stark reminder of how swiftly justice could move when the right levers were pulled. She took no pleasure in Stone's downfall, but she found solace in knowing that her stance, her voice, had made a difference. Life in Washington, D.C. rolled on, the city's ever-beating heart pushing it forward through political storms and social upheavals. And within that tapestry, Simone Carter continued to serve, upholding a duty far greater than any one person or institution. The illusions Officer Stone once held, of invincibility, of power without consequence, had been shattered. In their place, a small but significant glimmer of hope emerged, reminding everyone that accountability, while often delayed, eventually finds its mark. When a single moment of bigotry collided with a lifetime of resilience and training, the fallout was both inevitable and transformative. Officer Derek Stone, blinded by prejudice, never anticipated that his victim could be someone with the full backing of the federal government and a fierce moral code. Simone Carter's courage and unyielding belief in justice shone through, exposing a broken system and igniting conversations that reached far beyond a single traffic stop. If this story moved you, made you think, or stirred any emotions, I invite you to become part of the discussion. Like the video to show your support, share it to spread the message of accountability, and subscribe to stay connected with more stories that illuminate truths we can't afford to ignore. Your voice matters. Let's continue to amplify it together, ensuring that justice and fairness remain within everyone's reach.